Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. Today we are going to talk about a story that initially starts out with something incredibly stupid and ridiculous, but somehow escalates, gets twisted and turned, and you will see Ana Kasparian of the Young Turks snatch defeat from the jaws of victory as she states something is morally wrong, and then within 2 minutes is immediately doing that, except significantly worse. And this revolves around an ad from Jerome Davidson, a candidate out of Arizona. You might have heard about it. It's absurd in every possible way. It has Klan imagery. We're going to go into that, but first, we are sponsored, so I'm going to throw it over to the sponsor, and then I'm going to come back and talk about it on the other side. Weight loss is a serious issue for many Americans, and one of the reasons why is because after your 20s, on average, your metabolism is slowing down about 4% a year. One of the things that people are trying and is becoming more popular, and it's backed by research, is the keto diet. There's plenty of benefits. You can look it up. And I actually have a supplement that can either go with your keto diet or you could take to get some of the effects of that diet over at ketowithjustice.com. You try this powder, it helps speed up your metabolism, it elevates the level of ketones in your body so that you can get some of the effects, and maybe that puts you on the full diet, or maybe the weight loss gains you get from this are just enough to get you where you want to be. And the great thing about Keto with Justice is that it comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee, which means you can get this powder, you can consume it every single day, every single morning, you could weigh yourself constantly, see if you lose any weight, and then return it. Also, it's a 51% discount if you go over to my link. You literally cannot beat that deal. KetoWithJustice.com, the most amazing keto powder of all time. So Jerome Davidson, a candidate out of Arizona, is running for a seat. And of course, we have the campaign ads. And during the primary season, every year, it seems like in a country this big, we get one or two ads that are absolutely ridiculous and patently absurd. So I'm going to play what the Young Turks show in their video of the ad so you can see it, and we're just going to talk about for a minute how crazy this ad actually is, and then I'm going to tell you what's not actually crazy about it.
Democrats like to say that no one needs an AR-15 for self-defense, that no one could possibly need all 30 rounds. But when this rifle is the only thing standing between your family and a dozen angry Democrats in Klan hoods, you just might need that semi-automatic and all 30 rounds.
So, I've said multiple times on this channel that I don't like when people worship politicians, whether they be right-wing or left-wing. I find it disgusting and embarrassing. If you need a leader that badly, then you really don't understand America, because politicians are supposed to be elected to serve you. They work for you. They are beneath you, not above you. So, this guy portraying himself as this crazy John Wick, Idris Elba action hero in this ad, while hilarious, is absurd in every possible way. Now, I understand the overall message. He's trying to create a scenario where you would need an AR-15 with 30 rounds, and we're going to talk about what is true in this ad and the circumstances where this kind of scenario, although definitely way different from this scenario, actually is a good argument for you to be able to have a rifle in your home. However, we cannot ignore the fact that the Klan is featured in this ad, and a lot of them have gardening tools. One of them has the bat from The Walking Dead, Lucille, with the barbed wire on it. And let's be honest, the Klan is not a thing in the United States anymore. Now, I know technically there are 8,000 to 10,000 members of the KKK that are still lingering around, maybe doing some stuff, maybe they're going to meetings, but to give you some perspective, the undergraduates at the school that I went to were about 14,000. That's one set of undergraduates at one school in the city of New York that are almost double the actual members of the Klan, let alone the ones that are actually active. On top of that, the Klan hasn't killed anybody since around 1980, so the idea that the Klan is going to be rushing to your door is absurd.
But when this rifle is the only thing standing between your family and a dozen angry Democrats in Klan hoods.
Also, he labels these guys a mob of angry Democrats in Klan hoods. And here's the thing, even though it is historically true that the Ku Klux Klan was the militant arm of the Democratic Party, it was founded by Democrats, and the only political party in American history to accept the Klan formally was the Democratic Party, in reality, they're not a thing, they're not a major part of the Democratic constituency, so it's kind of absurd today to say, based on the fact that the Democrats Democrats, which, by the way, they definitely did, had the Klan within their midst, worked hand in hand with them. Woodrow Wilson very famously screened Birth of a Nation, which actually jump-started the Klan in the United States, where they reached something like 1 million to 2 million members. And you have to remember the United States population was about half the population that it is now in the United States, so that's a huge, significant deal. But again, 8 to 10,000 members, the Democrats aren't exactly relying on the Klan. They have another masked mob that does their violence on their behalf, a new militant arm, and they're called Antifa. But again, you wouldn't want to have a bunch of people in Antifa masks. I get why the historical element is in here, because people identify more with Antifa today than they would with the Klan. So in a way, it's absurd that he's calling them the Democrats. I understand the historical context behind that. Don't think I'm one of these people who's going to be like, actually, the Klan was Republican, because that is not the case. The Democratic Party, as I said, used to have a ton of members that were actively in the Klan. The Klan endorsement used to mean a lot, specifically in the South of the United States. And the same is not true for the Republicans. The big switch or whatever is not a realistic accounting of events. And if you look at the historical track record, despite what proponents of the big switch actually say, black people began leaving the Republican Party after the Hayes Compromise, which was post the Civil War, still in the 1800s, and they left even further during the FDR administration due to the fact that they were getting welfare benefits. So even while the Klan was a militant arm of the Democratic Party, black people were already trending in that direction. The Civil Rights Act did not necessarily do that trend. More Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act than Democrats. I'm sure you guys have all heard this before, and the amount of actual representatives that switched parties were actually significantly low. Most of them just slowly over time disassociated with the KKK, and I remember there was one specific story about a senator out of Virginia who was originally endorsed by the Klan who had actually turned around and endorsed Barack Obama for president. So some of these people have actually had arcs where they formally acknowledged their former ties to the Klan and disassociated from them in the future when that became non-politically feasible. Also, while as a blanket rule, I'm not against guns appearing in ads or you talking about defensive uses of firearms, because it's not talked about nearly enough, even though when the CDC did the study of defensive use of firearms, they found something like hundreds of thousands of examples of this happening. I don't think that saying, oh, you got to get ready to shoot people and throwing all this violent imagery and casting your political opponents as a violent terrorist organization is the best move going forward. So that's what I'm going to say. It's an ad meant to get attention. It's meant to go viral. It is what it is. And there's some hilarious components to it, but we got to throw it over to the Young Turks, because what they're going to identify as ridiculous, I'm going to prove to you, is in fact not ridiculous.
That's Jerome Davison, who is running for Congress in Arizona. And if you had to do a little bit of a double take there, because he was accusing Democrats of being the ones of wearing those hoods and sowing all the terror in the country. Yeah, that's what he's saying.
So first and foremost, as we talked about in the open, obviously the Klan was formerly associated with the Democratic Party. This is a historical fact. It is not in dispute. Ana Kasparian is going to try to say that Republicans are all ignorant of their history. However, even though this could be used as a factoid in terms of today's Democratic Party, this is true factually in every possible way. But Anna's going to say some other nonsense that's a little bit ridiculous, and I gotta talk about it.
He is making the claim that it's not the right wing that's spouting white replacement conspiracy theories, that it's the Democratic Party putting on the hoods to terrorize black people in this country.
So Anna just threw white replacement theory into the mix because this is something that's been in the news. There's nothing in this video that references white replacement theory at all whatsoever. She's just bringing that up to try to say, oh my God, the Republicans are pushing this conspiracy theory. They're bad people, blah, blah, blah. Now, remember, Ana Kasparian has talked about what the left calls this, which is the browning of America, in very positive terms on her show. She actually has videos where she says white replacement theory is ridiculous while simultaneously celebrating the demographic changes in the United States of America.
Like, look, I remember doing a show for Fusion back in 2016 where we were specifically talking about how the demographic, and we were celebrating it. We didn't think it was a bad thing, obviously, that, the Trump support was like the last gasp of like white America, right?
Yeah.
I remember talking about that. And we were celebrating it. We didn't think it was a bad thing, obviously.
Now, I've discussed a bunch of times on this channel how people saying, oh, your demographics are 100% gonna stay the same way forever is actually ridiculous. And I've talked about Hispanics specifically and how they seem to be shifting over time more towards the Republican Party. And there's a lot of Democrats that are in a panic about it. But to say that this idea is something that isn't talked about as a political strategy in the United States of America is absurd. There's a book that's called The New Democratic Majority. I believe it came out in 2004. It was also a component of Obama's campaign to get all these minorities together to outvote the white conservative voting bloc. And people thought that the Democratic Party would never lose a presidential election again by a certain amount of time. Now, if you go into the idea that this is a Jewish conspiracy theory to get rid of all the white people and marginalize them in their own country or whatever nonsense that people are putting forward, then I understand how that can be dangerous and how that can be a problem. But if you can't understand why any political party, whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, want more people to be able to vote for them so that they can remain in power, then you don't understand politics. I don't know how you can talk about congressional gerrymandering on one day and then all of a sudden a few days later say it's ridiculous for people to point out that the Democratic Party is pro-immigration because they think that will lead to electoral success in the future. And part of the reason why the Republican Party is anti that same immigration is because they hold the same position that this will damage their electoral prospects in the future. Again, you don't have to go into crazy conspiracy theory. By the way, I've said multiple different times, voting patterns change over time, so the idea that you think it's set in stone is absurd, and anybody who's pushing you that on the right wing is incorrect. They don't understand how voting changes over time. They haven't looked at the Hispanic numbers. They're not aware of what's actually going on in this country. But yeah, so that's nothing to do with this video. But again, I just want to point out that Anna will say that replacement theory or the browning of America, as NPR or the New York Times or whatever, is something that doesn't exist. It's a conspiracy theory, whatever. But then in the same breath, she'll talk about how she celebrates that and she's happy for it and that she wants this to happen. So these are the pushers of that theory. On the other side, they're just saying it's a good thing. And again, if you're in the anti-Semitic camp where you're like, the Jews are masterminding it, you're ridiculous, you're absurd. Just because a large portion of Jewish people happen to vote Democrat doesn't mean there's a grand Jewish conspiracy. And do me a favor, if you want to leave a comment telling me that there is a grand Jewish conspiracy, then don't leave that comment, hit the unsubscribe button, and take off. We don't need you here. You're garbage.
You are garbage.
You're garbage.
You're not forwarding my agenda. We're not on the same team. Good? Got it? Clear? Let's roll into this video because it's hilarious.
And he claims we need the assault weapons. We need the assault weapons to what? To murder Democrats?
Yeah.
Based on the false premise that they are part of the Klan? Part of the Klan?
So Anna's tone of voice is just unbearable in this video. She's talking about murdering Democrats based on the false premise that they're part of the Klan? What? Get it? The joke is the question. Now let's move on to John.
What is this?
That, I think, is actually the part that bothers me least about this. I mean, it's deranged. Like, it's ahistoric, and he knows it. Yeah, back in the day, if you were to go back 100 years ago, members of the Klan probably would be Democrats.
So John says it's ahistoric, and he knows it, and then he says, back in the day, if you were to go back 100 years, members of the Klan would be members of the Democrats. So it is historic, but that's not why it's ridiculous. The reason why it's ridiculous, and again, the Young Turks won't say this, because they keep trying to breathe life into the KKK, despite their dramatically diminished membership, is because the Klan hasn't killed anybody since 1980. They're totally irrelevant. Again, it's 8,000 to 10,000 guys that are just hanging around wearing the hood still because they still think that that's a way to become successful. I mean, you've even had notable members of the KKK, like David Duke, leave the Klan because he's like, I can't be associated with these people. I'm never going to have any political success with them. They're worthless. They're garbage.
You are garbage.
You're garbage.
But John can't say that. He's just saying it's ridiculous to say that the Democrats would use racial politics for anything. Wow. I can't believe it.
And if they were alive today, they wouldn't be Democrats. I mean, like you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't claim that the Democrats are just constantly like virtue signaling to non-white Americans and giving them things. And also simultaneously, they're the actual KKK. Or maybe you can, I don't know. A lot of Republicans probably like imagining that everyone is as racist as they are.
It's actually not that complicated. While I agree the current modern day association of the Democratic Party with the KKK doesn't make any sense, it's not because the Democratic Party, or any political party by the way, have this moral backbone that would prevent them from working with racists. Again, the Democratic Party pushes racial division and racism. Now they just do it for a new demographic. It's a similar strategy, and of course being violent and militant is not as successful in the modern day, although they did endorse the Black Lives Matter riots, but it's a different group that they're pandering to as a form of strategy, because a lot of the people in the Democratic Party are associated with Lyndon Baines Johnson signing the Civil Rights Act, and they figured that they want to keep this minority coalition. And when they got to a certain percentage of the population, this is when the New American Majority strategy came out, where Obama was going to put together this intersectional coalition, and therefore, if Obama did it, even though he was a uniquely talented politician and uniquely charismatic, all other Democrats were going to follow the same strategy and somehow become super electorally successful for decades and decades to come. This is the idea behind the Democratic Party. They're pushing anti-white stuff. The Young Turks pushes it all the time because that's who they're trying to market it to. So that's the link that people try to make to do past and present and all that. And again, like I said, the Klan totally irrelevant, so bringing them up is absurd. Also, again, garden tools to attack this guy. Hilarious.
So who the hell knows? But that is the part that bothers me the least. The fantasy that is conjured up there bothers me so much more. It's like I've talked multiple times on the show about how ridiculous it is that these people think that they're going to have to defend their house from a roving band of marauders, KKK or otherwise.
Now, I don't want to be too harsh on John because I'm going to be significantly harsher on Ana Kasparian later, but this is just proof of his ignorance. While I agree that the chances that the Klan are going to storm your house in current year is absurd. They are irrelevant. It's basically non-existent. But the idea that the Klan or otherwise might not storm your house or isn't going to storm your house, and therefore you wouldn't need a rifle or anything to defend your property, is just proof of John Iadarolla's ignorance. I remember some stories out of New York, one very significant one out of Long Island, where a bunch of gang members were crowded on this guy's property, planning a break-in. This guy grabbed his rifle when they started charging the door, fired shots into the ground, scared them off, and they all turned out to be members of a very violent gang. On top of that, the guy was arrested because it was New York, and they're like, how dare you shoot your own lawn in self-defense when you have your wife and kid on the inside? And even when I was pulling up this story, there was actually another story out of New York that this one referenced in the same article of a minority person who said that a bunch of white teenagers who were mobbing up, yelling racial epithets at the homeowner, one of them was shot. Those are just two cases in New York where guns are heavily restricted and you don't have a castle doctrine to defend your property. But if you look at channels like Active Self-Defense or any channel that reviews security footage from those Ring video doorbell systems, you will see that a bunch of people trying to break into your house at a single time, and you being able to defend yourself, a defensive use of the firearm, is a thing that happens. Now, the thing that separates it from maybe an action movie or something is that typically when people see the gun or they hear the gunfire, they start running away. They don't continue into the property. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why you would want to have it. And the idea that it's a fantasy or a LARP or whatever just shows that John does not live in an area or understand the concept of people breaking into your house and the police being minutes away when you have seconds.
When a disgusting racist gunman opened fire in a Buffalo supermarket to murder black people, he was motivated. He was encouraged to do that by right-wing domestic terrorists who want to slaughter you.
Just think about where we got to in this video. Remember, the opening of this video, the first 3 minutes of this video, is condemnation from the Young Turks, from Ana Kasparian, of the right wing, for saying that the left wing is coming to kill you. And then Ana Kasparian says, here's a shooting that happened, a one-off, one person committed the shooting. It was horrible. We talked about it. We talked about the heroism of the retired cop who tried to fight off the shooter and how he tragically failed in a video on this channel. And she says the right wing was backing it up because the right wing is encouraging their supporters to go out and slaughter you. Remember, the whole problem that they had was this guy saying that he had a gun to protect himself in order to slaughter Democrats that were definitely coming to attack him. And already within 3 minutes, Ana Kasparian is using the same exact rhetoric, worse even, because she's not saying just the KKK, which is a ridiculous, borderline fictitious organization at this point in comparison to their history. But yeah, this is going to get way worse.
Let's just keep it real.
But what if you wanted
Tucker
to be
Carlson
interviewed
is not a
by them?
Democrat. Tucker Carlson, who sows fear and paranoia among white individuals in this country, is not a Democrat. Democrats have tons of issues, okay? Putting on the white hoods and trying to slaughter black people is not one of them.
Yeah.
It's not one of them. I don't know how you're keeping calm, and I did not expect Dungeons and Dragons to make an appearance in the context of this story.
Look, I'm
fired up because I'm sick of this garbage.
You are garbage.
You're garbage.
So now Anna's just revving up the engine. She's bringing up Tucker Carlson, saying that Tucker Carlson is encouraging violence, he's encouraging slaughter and all that. And then she gets mad at John for keeping calm, even though the premise of this video is look at this ridiculous political ad.
This is why Republicans want to burn history books. This is why Republicans lie to the American people, including parents, to trick them into thinking their kids were learning some curriculum called critical race theory, when in reality they're not.
Now, of course, Anna's saying this is why they want to burn history books. This is why they're trying to trick people into thinking that their kids are learning critical race theory, which they're not, which is just absurd. Again, if you look at the books that weren't selected, like in the Florida example, a lot of them were math textbooks that had criticisms of Republicans on climate change, stuff about racial equity and police stops in New York City. Again, there's a Florida math textbook and how those were racist, and a bunch of other partisan disputed information that does not belong in a math textbook. Even if you think that this woke nonsense belongs in like a class like critical race theory or some kind of ethnic studies curriculum in a high school level or whatever, the idea that you would place this in an elementary school math textbook is very dubious, and those examples are real. I will link to stories in the description. You can see the excerpts for yourself. And the thing is, we always play this game when we talk about critical race theory in school, where they'll say, oh, critical race theory is this academic niche legal field that is not being taught in school because it's taught at certain law schools. But then they advocate for the praxis, the stuff that's advocated for by these scholars that should be in education, but they say, oh no, that's just regular history. But the whole point of critical race theory is that it's distinct from history. Nobody's against, well, I shouldn't say that. Some people are against teaching the history of slavery in the United States of America. The Young Turks, by the way, are against teaching the history of slavery in the context of the history of the world, because that doesn't look good for their messaging that evil white people were the ones responsible for it, even though slavery was with us throughout all of human history until the British decided it was immoral and they sought to abolish it around the world. And then shortly after that, the American Civil War happened and the Americans abolished slavery and they joined the British in the worldwide abolishment of it. The Arab and African slave trades that were in the Arab world and the African world were long holders of the slavery tradition, and it still exists today in those countries right now. Some of them, not all, obviously, but whatever. They don't want to talk about that. They only want to talk about the context of American slavery. But even if we are going to do that and teach a very Western-centered, Amero-centric version of slavery in the context of the United States, I would be fine with it. But what they're trying to do is go beyond that and teach these power dynamics, racial politics, and again, a curriculum based on activists saying that we need to inject activism into the curriculum. That's how you end up with racial nonsense in math textbooks when you want people to learn math in math class. The left wants them to learn social justice in those very classes. So Anna's in favor of this. We've gone through this multiple different times. They'll say it's not critical race theory. Then you describe what it actually is, and they say, well, that's just history. And then you say, no, that's not history. And then you find out that ultimately when you go down the line that they're in favor of it. It's how every conversation about this goes, and that's what they're advocating for. I'm fine with teaching history. I'm not afraid of history. Ana Kasparian, the Armenian who works at the Young Turks, might be afraid of talking about history, but not me.
Because they want to institutionalize, the revisionist history that they fantasize about. Mm-hmm. So Americans are ignorant, so Americans don't understand their own identity, and they'll be just super vulnerable for exploitation. Super vulnerable for the kind of disgusting disinformation that you saw in that video.
So to be clear, Ana Kasparian's projection levels are off the charts. They're well over 9,000 because Ana Kasparian's accounts of history are revisionist garbage. Have you ever seen the way that Ana covered the Tulsa race riots? She talked about how 3,000 people were killed in Tulsa that day.
There was a physical altercation over the gun. The white man gets shot and he's killed, and then the riots erupt. Now, the outcome of this is beyond disturbing. The night's carnage left 3,000 African Americans dead.
3,000 African Americans dead.
The real count is about 38 to 39 if you count an unborn baby. By the way, 12 of those people were white people, and the reason I call it the Tulsa Race Riot and not the Tulsa Race Massacre is because the black people, by all accounts, fired first when a black person was arrested and accused of sexual assault against a white girl in an elevator. Now, you could say the white people, especially in the context of the time, were going there to lynch the guy, but if you're going to give a historically accurate account, you can't rely on Ana Kasparian, who thinks that the Tulsa race riot was a 9/11 style massacre and that the Klan was involved, when again, that's just not true.
3,000 African Americans dead.
Now again, don't take my word for it. Look at the scholars that were actually investigating and trying to exhume graves to see if there were more bodies in this situation. And also remember that even calling it Black Wall Street is something made up by the left. If you look at all the newspapers at the time, it was not called Black Wall Street. That is a modern name applied to this area of Tulsa. It was actually called Little Africa. They lie about absolutely everything in relation to that, and most people get their account of the events from the dramatized version of the events from the HBO show Watchmen. So if you want to talk about revising history and reframing history and all that jazz, start with Ana Kasparian thinking that the Tulsa race riot was a 9/11 style massacre.
And the thing that really fascinates me is the unending obsession with violence. Oh, the right wing can't get enough. There's never enough mass shootings in the country for the right wing. There's never enough assault weapons, never enough high capacity magazines, never enough people getting slaughtered within our borders for the right wing.
So now Ana Kasparian is saying that the right wing loves mass shootings, like they're in support of them. I'm sure that if you were to talk to any right winger, would be the answer that they would give you. That would be the honest account from their own position. Anna's totally not exaggerating, straw manning, and just trying to poison the well on her political opponents. And now she's moving on to talk about how they're the #1 death cult in the world.
They love it. It's the #1 death cult, not in this country, in the freaking world.
Again, this is someone who's saying that the violent rhetoric from the right wing is getting out of hand, and now she's talking about the right, half the country, or really 30% of the country, because most people in this country don't actually follow politics very exclusively, but 30% are solid voting block for the right, and 30% are solid voting block for the left, and everybody else calls themselves independents, and they just go where the wind blows. But they're ready for slaughter, they're ready for violence, they cheer for it, they're the #1 death cult in the world, they're gonna get you, they're scary. Remember, I'm criticizing a guy for saying that the Democrats are going to try to get you and kill you, and you might have to defend yourself. But again, look where this is going.
Okay, there hasn't been an unarmed black person who got shut down,
Did they get shut down or did they get shot down, Anna?
who got shot down.
Shut down, who got shut down.
By a cop that they didn't delight in. Let's just keep it real. You'll see an unarmed black person running away from the cops, and right-wingers in America are falling over themselves to defend the cop because they love it. They love seeing it.
Now, the reason the people defend the police in these encounters is because the general public's attitude, the media's attitude, is to always assume the cops are at fault. Anna just said, oh, this guy's running away. Now, she's not referencing a specific instance. If she was, I would be able to go into it and destroy her on it. She might be referencing the incident out of Akron, Ohio, which we covered on this channel, where the guy actually fired at the cops moments before he jumped out of the car in a ski mask. So they assumed him to be armed, and they had proper cause to assume him to be armed. And then he turned suddenly, might have even been a suicide by cop, looked like he might have even been reaching for a weapon. He had left it in the car, but again, the cops didn't know this in the 20 seconds of him jumping out of the car after firing on them with the ski mask that he might have been doing this, and then they shot that person. So the reason that people back up the cops in that instance is because they understand the circumstances, the applicable law, and it's all about whether or not a reasonable person in that same situation would assume that a situation is a deadly threat. Obviously, if this guy just shot at you moments ago, which Ana doesn't like to talk about, in fact, in their video, they talked about how it was alleged, maybe, even though you see it on video, then he presents a deadly threat, and it's reasonable to assume that he presents a deadly threat.
But you're gonna put out an ad claiming that it's the Democrats putting on the white hoods? Man, I don't know what this guy's end goal is.
Again, I'm trying to be as fair as humanly possible because nobody's putting on the white hoods. Not Democrats, not Republicans. The Klan has less people than undergraduate students at my university. They're an irrelevant part of the country. But if you want to talk about who's putting on the black mask, who's actually coming to destroy areas, entire cities, entire blocks, shopping centers, looting and stealing and all that, and who's cheering them on, it is the Democratic Party. It is the left wing. We had unparalleled left-wing violence in the 2020 year following the death of George Floyd, and Ana Kasparian is just going to pretend like this doesn't happen. And the idea that you might have to defend yourself when politicians are letting rioting go and none of these people are being prosecuted, or in the situations like I described earlier, again, examples everywhere, or in any of the examples where the CDC itself says that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of defensive uses of firearms, is not unreasonable. But again, the Klan, yes, charging your house with gardening tools and the bat from Walking Dead, probably not going to happen. I'm willing to concede that point because the Klan is virtually non-existent in the United States of America. And when Daryl Davis is through with them, he's going to get them all to give up their robes.
He wants to be interviewed by Tucker Carlson. He knows that Tucker Carlson doesn't care if he lives or dies, but he wants to be interviewed by him.
Slaughter you, okay? Not personally. Tucker Carlson would never get his hands dirty. But he encourages others to want to slaughter you.
Now, I know that Tucker Carlson, because he's the most successful host on Fox News, is one of the most hated people by the left. But here you have Ana Kasparian saying that Tucker Carlson wants to slaughter you. He wants to get you killed. He might not want to do it personally, but he is wanting you to be killed because you're left wing. Let us not forget that Antifa thugs already stormed Tucker Carlson's house once when his address got leaked online. They already tried to kick in his door and attack his family. He wasn't even home at the time because of rhetoric like this, because people were saying that Tucker Carlson is going to cause the fascist revolution, because people were saying that Tucker Carlson's words, his speech, his goofy faces in response to left-wingers that he's interviewing are actual violence. People have out in the real world tried to commit violence against Tucker Carlson and against his family. And this isn't the first time that left-wingers have done this. By the way, right-wing people have done this too. This is why you gotta pare down the rhetoric. This is why I don't encourage people this Civil War rhetoric or anything like that.
I'm sorry, Tony. He was my friend. So was I. Pew, pew, pew. Up the kick, Captain America kick. Pew, pew. Shield. Pew, pew. Pew, pew, pew. Taking your face off. There's a turtle.
I think it's absurd, but Ana Kasparian, after condemning the idea that a politician would say the other side is coming to kill you and you might have to defend yourself, is literally doing the exact same thing.
But he encourages others to want to slaughter you. To slaughter you. To slaughter you.
To slaughter you!
To slaughter you.
Now, I saw this portion in Devin Tracy's video on the subject matter. By the way, as I always say with Devin, you can still watch his videos. He's completed the Central Park series, or he's actually releasing new parts of the Central Park series on Censor.tv. Use promo code AIU for a discount and to make sure your money goes to support him. And on Patreon, his videos are better than ever and all that. And he's 100% right in his diagnosis that Ana repeating, "to slaughter you," was incredibly obnoxious. So we're going to laugh at that.
To want to slaughter you. To slaughter you!
Again, you have Ana Kasparian ginning up hysteria while she's criticizing a random politician who is running for office for ginning up hysteria, and then doubling down on it and repeating it in the most shrill, obnoxious way possible.
And you correctly identified it. Like, a core part of being a right-winger is fantasizing about an excuse to be able to start killing people. Like, most are not just gonna go out and kill a random person, but they really want a justification for it.
So here you have John saying a core part of the right wing is fantasizing about killing people. Now they don't want to do it against a random person, but they're looking for a justification. Now listen to how Ana responds. And I find it hilarious because she basically treats John Iadarola like he's not in the room, a feeling I feel like he's familiar with in his life. Because he just said that. He just said that this was a bad thing. He's condemning this mentality on the right wing, and look where Anna's going to go for it.
All right, the left needs to arm itself. Gun laws aren't going to change. The right wing is vicious. They can't wait to slaughter people. They fantasize about it every day. They even put it in their political ads. The left, at this point, needs to be smart, get trained, arm yourselves. I don't know what's coming at this point. But how many times does the right wing need to tell you that they want to slaughter you for you to do what's necessary to protect yourselves?
Yes, we have come full circle in this video. Ana is calling on the left wing not just to arm themselves for the normal purposes of self-defense, but to arm themselves because the right wing is ready to slaughter you. They're telling you that they're coming to slaughter you, and you have to be prepared because they're going to slaughter you. This is the Civil War rhetoric that people have criticized from Tim Pool in the past. This is the nonsense that I have criticized in the past because I don't like the idea that people are taking as a norm that we have to resort to shooting each other in the streets in order to solve our political disputes. Now, I've said multiple different times that despite the left's craziness over the overturning of Roe versus Wade, that Roe v. Wade being overturned is a perfect example of people working within the system to achieve a goal. The Supreme Court established this precedent. There is not an argument in my mind that they had a constitutional basis to do it 49 years ago, but Republicans, in response to that, didn't get out in the streets. They didn't start shooting people. I know somebody's going to bring up an example of an abortion clinic being bombed, whatever. We all understand that there are isolated instances of people doing the wrong thing, but through the political process, they got the justices appointed, they took a case to the court, and they got that decision that they were adamantly against overturned all through the system. Despite what you say about how this person cheats or that person cheats or whatever, in reality, the major changes in law happen from working within the system, not from doing crazy violence from outside. This ain't the American Revolution times. Everybody needs to calm down. You shouldn't be cheering on and supporting the idea of going to a civil war anyway. It's one of the worst periods in American history. It does not need a sequel. And I'm not in favor of anybody, right, left, or center, forwarding the idea that it has to come to blows every time an election or a court decision doesn't work out in your favor.
I'm sorry, gun laws aren't going to change. They're just not. We have one side of this country that's full of lunatics who salivate over mass deaths, mass murders, and then you have the other side that's like still playing patty cakes, hoping that the Democrats are going to protect them. Get armed. Buy your guns. Please keep them safe. Lock them up. I don't know if you're ever going to need to use them. I hope you don't. But at this point, I'm getting increasingly uncomfortable at the thought that you have right-wing lunatics who are heavily armed, constantly telling us that they want to slaughter us, okay? And we're just sitting ducks.
The purpose of having firearms, whether you're talking about defense from a tyrannical government or just self-defense in general, is for you to be able to defend yourself from a reasonable threat to your life. A reasonable person in your situation is not expected to be subject to death or serious bodily injury based on the whims of another, whether that be a criminal or whether that be an overstepping government agency. It's in our Declaration of Independence. We all understand that, but we're not at that point. You're not at the point where people are coming to your door trying to kill you for your political beliefs or anything like that. And these little lefty Antifa losers that are destroying property and all that you might have to defend yourself against in individual instances if you find yourself in those circumstances, are not representative of where the country's going as a whole, and hopefully they're not, and you shouldn't root for the fact that they're not, and you shouldn't even be silently cheering on the fact that this could be a possibility. A civil war, the Civil War in the United States of America, was the most destructive war in the history of this country. Another one with modern weaponry, 300 million guns in the country, the government with more weapons and all that, would be even more destructive. It would destroy this nation, and the winner of the Civil War, it would be a winner in name only, because there would be nothing left in this nation. You should never cheer on this possibility. You should stop saying that the other side is immediately or imminently going to slaughter you, because it's embarrassing. Joe Biden is a bungling idiot. He's basically demented. Anyone can be defeated in the political process, and those people who tell you that, oh, one side is always losing, I know this is really popular on the right wing, are just wrong. Look at the way that the trend has been going in terms of gun rights in this country. Look at the way that the trend has been going against abortion in this country. It has become more pro-life over time. It has become more pro-gun over time. Significantly more on the pro-gun side, but getting rid of Roe versus Wade is a huge thing that will allow the states to craft their own laws. The idea that you can't do anything just because the Democrats are running Hollywood and putting woke messaging in movies is absurd. It's been proven false. So everybody calm down, back up a little bit. There's always another election. Everybody who tells you you're on the precipice of disaster in America is just doing that as a marketing standpoint. When things really get horrible, I will tell you. And if you're watching my videos, you should definitely 100%, as I always definitely say, listen to my opinion on absolutely everything. Even though that's a joke, I'm serious about this. Everybody calm down.
Number one death cult in the world, largest death cult in the world, the American right wing. They love death. They tell us every single day, and when they tell you who they are, you should believe them.
Look, I have no problem with self-defense. I have no problem with the Second Amendment. I've made these positions clear on this channel multiple different times. If you want to buy a gun for self-defense, totally on board with that. And in fact, I think it's a good thing that the left side of the political spectrum would be into self-defense, because that means it's less likely that we're going to get some serious gun-grabbing legislation if both sides are into the American gun culture. That being said, Ana is just being ridiculous here, and people who are saying that the other side is just waiting to slaughter them are being ridiculous. You have to understand that the people who are seriously into politics are such a small portion of the population, it's absurd. Progressives, for all the Young Turk says about how the country are progressives, the people who vote that way consistently, or the people who consider themselves that, are only about 8% of the population, which means that the people who are super serious and informed about politics and don't just feel progressive are significantly lower percentage of the population. They're not coming for you physically. The political system hasn't completely failed us. Please calm down. Please relax. Please actually focus on what you can do in the system and discourage anybody who calls you out for violence. First and foremost, if somebody's asking you as somebody on the right to do political violence, and you don't know them, or you just met them, or even if you do know them, the chances of them being an FBI infiltrator are exceedingly high. Remember the Gretchen Whitmer plot, where a significant portion, if not the outright majority of the people that were working on that plot were actually law enforcement infiltrators? That's what you're setting yourself up for when you buy into the fact that you need to act personally now. And by the way, you're not going to be a hero. You're not going to be remembered as anybody who's important. You're going to be remembered as a monster by the families that you impact by your stupid actions, and for the rest of the society, for the rest of the world, they'll forget about you. Your family will consider you as a source of shame for generations to come, but you're not going to make yourself a hero. It is the height of vanity and self-importance to think that the end times are going to happen in your lifetime. You're not that special. I hate to break it to you. None of you are that special, so everybody calm down, stop hyping it up, stop ginning up hysteria, and call out Ana Kasparian every time in the future she calls out a conservative for using supposedly violent rhetoric, because she went way further than this guy. That's all I really have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about Ana Kasparian, calling for a civil war. Till next time.